Before I tell you what I did, let me tell you what he did first. My husband Dante looked me dead in the eyes on a Tuesday morning, the same Tuesday I had just gotten off a 12-hour shift at the hospital, the same Tuesday our daughter had a recital I almost missed, and he told me he was tired. Not tired of working, not tired of life. Tired of me. And then, before I could even process the word, he smiled. Not a sad smile, not a regretful smile. A smile that said he had already made up his mind a long time ago. A smile that said I was simply the last to know. I stood in our kitchen, the kitchen I had picked the tiles for, the kitchen I had stayed up painting at 2 a.m. while he was out with his friends, and I felt the floor fall out from under me. But here's what Dante didn't know. He didn't know that I had learned, 3 days earlier, that he had been quietly talking to a divorce attorney. He didn't know that I had found the emails. He didn't know that while he was busy planning his exit, I had already started building mine. And he certainly didn't know that by the time he actually filed those papers, the most valuable things in our life together would no longer be where he expected them to be. This is the story of how I protected everything I built, how a man who thought he was leaving me with nothing found out that the woman he underestimated had been 3 steps ahead the entire time, and how the system he thought would reward him ended up being the very thing that held him accountable. My name is Michelle, I'm 35 years old, I live in Las Vegas, and this is what happened when I refused to be anyone's victim. Stay with me, because I promise you, every single detail of this story matters. The moment you think you know where it's going, it will surprise you again. Please subscribe before we go any further. Your support means everything, and it reminds me, I'm not alone in this. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to rewrite the story of your life without asking you, this channel is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now. To understand what I did, you have to understand what I sacrificed. I met Dante Ramirez when I was 24 years old, working as a registered nurse at a hospital on the outskirts of Las Vegas. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, effortlessly, almost carelessly, like he wasn't even trying and didn't need to. He had this laugh that filled up a room, dark eyes that made you feel seen, and he had a plan. He was building a construction and property management company from the ground up, and he talked about it the way some people talk about religion, with complete, unshakable belief. He said he was going to build something generational, something that would last. I believed him. More than that, I helped him. My friend Alicia warned me early on. Alicia was the kind of person who said difficult things out loud, the kind of person most people didn't appreciate until they were sitting in the wreckage of a situation she had predicted. Michelle, she said, stirring her coffee at the diner we used to go to on Sunday mornings. Men like Dante don't build things with women, they build things on top of them. I laughed her off. I was in love. What I didn't realize at the time was that Alicia had already watched her own mother go through exactly this. Her mother, Moira, had spent 20 years supporting a husband named Henry, who left the moment the business became successful. I didn't understand that lesson until it was almost too late for me. In the early years, Dante and I were genuinely a team. I was working double shifts at the hospital while he was trying to get the business off the ground. I gave him money from my savings, $40,000, when a crucial deal fell through in year 2. I spent weekends doing the accounting because he couldn't afford a bookkeeper. I answered phones. I drove to meet contractors. I did things no wife should have had to do, not because I was forced to, but because I believed. And it worked. By the time we were in our late 20s, Dante's company had landed several major contracts in the Las Vegas commercial real estate space. He had a partner, a sharp, methodical man named Quentin, who balanced out Dante's impulsiveness with cold precision. The two of them together were genuinely formidable. Properties started getting acquired. Revenue started climbing. We bought a house in Summerlin, a beautiful house with a pool and a view of the valley. I finally cut back my hours at the hospital. We had our daughter, Diana, who came into the world like a small, perfect storm and reorganized every priority I had ever held. On the surface, we had everything. But somewhere in those years, something shifted in Dante. I can't point to a single moment. It was more like watching water slowly erode rock. imperceptible day by day, catastrophic in the end. He started staying later at the office, he started traveling more for business, he started speaking to me with a kind of casual impatience, like I was an assistant who wasn't keeping up, rather than the woman who had written checks from her own account to keep his company alive when no bank would touch him. My friend Diana, yes, we share a name, which was always a funny coincidence, noticed it before I would let myself. Diana was someone who worked in family law, not as an attorney, but as a paralegal for a firm in downtown Las Vegas. She had seen the patterns play out more times than she could count. You should know what you own, Michelle, she told me one evening. Not what you think you own, what you actually own. I've seen women come into that office who didn't even know the name of the bank their joint account was held at. I thought she was being dramatic. I was wrong. The email came on a Wednesday. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that because I know there are people who would want to make that the story, the suspicious, paranoid wife going through her husband's things. That wasn't what happened. What happened was simpler and more painful than that. Dante had been traveling a lot that month, claiming it was related to a new development project on the outskirts of Henderson. He'd left his laptop at home, something he almost never did. Our home printer had run out of ink and I needed to print something for Diana's school. I connected to his laptop to print the document, and his email was open on the screen. I wasn't looking for anything. But the name of the email sender stopped me. Lance Oliver, family law attorney. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. The subject line read, Asset Division, Preliminary Strategy. I sat down in the chair, my legs gave out. I sat there for I don't know how long, staring at the screen before I finally opened it. I won't repeat every word of what was in that email, but I will tell you the parts that mattered. Dante had been in contact with this attorney, a man named Lance Oliver, for at least 6 weeks. The email thread was long. They had discussed the structure of his business, the property holdings, the accounts, and then there was a line, one specific line, that I have burned into my memory like a brand. The primary concern is ensuring the business assets remain protected from division. We should move quickly before she becomes aware of the strategy. Before she becomes aware. Before I became aware. I closed the laptop. I went to the bathroom. I turned on the shower so Diana wouldn't hear me, and I sat on the floor and I fell completely apart for exactly 11 minutes. Then I got up. I washed my face. And I called Alicia. Alicia answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring. I need you to listen to me, I said. Something in my voice must have told her everything before I said a word, because there was no joke, no preamble, no hello. She just said, I'm listening. I told her about the email. I told her about Lance Oliver. I told her about the phrase before she becomes aware. I told her all of it, standing in the bathroom with the shower still running and my wet face looking back at me from the mirror. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Alicia said, Michelle, do you remember what I told you when you first got with him? I closed my eyes. Yes. Okay, she said, good, because I need you to remember that, and I need you to remember it for the next few months while we figure this out. Are you with me? Yes. First thing you're going to do, she said, is call a woman named Monet. She's a financial advisor I know personally. She is sharp, she is discreet, and she has seen this exact situation before. You are going to call her tomorrow and you are going to tell her everything. Second thing, and this is equally important, you are going to act completely normal with Dante. Can you do that? I looked at myself in the mirror. Yes, I said, I can do that. And I did. For the next several days, I was the perfect wife. I made dinner. I asked about his trips. I smiled when he walked into the room. I gave him absolutely zero reason to suspect that anything had changed, that I knew a single thing, that the ground beneath our marriage had already cracked beyond repair. Inside, I was building. Monette Williams was not what I expected. I had imagined someone severe and corporate, all sharp suits and clipboard energy. What I found instead was a woman in her mid-40s who wore a warm, rust-colored blazer and had the kind of calm authority that comes from having been through fire personally, not just professionally. She poured us both coffee, real coffee, not the office machine kind, and she said, "Tell me everything and start from before the beginning." So I did. I told her about the $40,000 I had given Dante in year 2. I told her about the accounting work, the weekends, the double shifts. I told her about the email. I told her about Lance Oliver. I told her about the phrase "before she becomes aware." Monet listened without interrupting. She took careful notes. And when I finished, she looked at me with an expression that was equal parts compassion and precision. "Okay," she said, "here's what I need you to understand first. In Nevada, assets acquired during a marriage are generally considered marital property. That includes business equity built during the marriage, regardless of whose name is on the paperwork. What his attorney is trying to do is create the appearance that the business was separate property, either premarital or structured in a way that insulates it from division. That is a strategy. It is aggressive, but it is also beatable." I felt something loosen in my chest. "Now," she continued, "the second thing I need you to understand is that there is a legal and ethical way to protect yourself, and there is an illegal way. We are going to talk only about the legal way. There are assets in your name, your nursing income, your savings accounts, certain joint investments that we can restructure, not to hide them, but to ensure they are correctly categorized and protected in the event of a divorce filing. Are you following me?" I was following her with the complete focus of someone whose entire future depended on it. We talked for 3 hours that first meeting. By the end of it, I had a plan. If you're still watching this, thank you. Please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. There are so many people in your life going through something similar, and they need to know this channel exists. Share this video and subscribe right now. The best part of this story is still ahead. I want to be careful here because I know that the word secret in the title of this video raises questions. I want to address that directly. What I did was not fraudulent. What I did was not illegal. What I did was something that Dante had already been doing for 6 weeks before I discovered the email. I got a lawyer and I started protecting myself. The difference is that he was trying to protect himself from me. I was trying to protect myself from being left with nothing. Those are not the same thing. My first call after meeting with Monet was to a family law attorney, a woman named Alex, someone Diana from the law firm had recommended with absolute confidence. Alex was the kind of attorney who made you feel like she had a blueprint of every possible courtroom and had already drawn out all the exits. "You're not the first person to sit in that chair," she told me at our first meeting. "And here's what I need you to know. Everything you do from this moment forward needs to be documented, time-stamped, and above board. You're not playing offense, you're playing defense. But defense, done correctly, wins." Under Alex's guidance and with Monet's financial expertise, I began the process of protecting the assets that were legitimately mine. My personal savings account, money I had accumulated from my nursing income over 11 years, was moved to a separate individual account in my name only. This was not marital property. This was income I had earned. It had every right to be protected. A small investment account that I had opened in my own name with inheritance money from my grandmother was similarly restructured to ensure it was clearly categorized as separate property. I also obtained a complete and forensic picture of every marital asset, every account, every property, every business holding, which is something every spouse in a marriage has the legal right to do. What I found when I looked carefully with Monet and Alex's help was illuminating. This is where the story gets darker before it gets better. As Monet and Alex began pulling together the financial picture of our marriage, certain things emerged that I had not known about. Quentin, Dante's business partner, had signed a series of amended partnership agreements over the previous 18 months that significantly reduced the apparent value of Dante's ownership stake in the company. On paper, it looked like Dante had willingly diluted his own position. In practice, this was a structure designed to make his share of the business appear worth far less than it actually was. This is a tactic that Alex told me she had seen before. It's called pre-divorce planning, she said, her voice measured and factual. It's when one spouse begins restructuring assets, usually with a trusted partner or family member, specifically to reduce what appears to be available for division. It's more common than people think. It's also something courts look at very carefully when it's discovered. The discovery part was going to be crucial. My other friend, Moira, who had gone through her own divorce years earlier and had since become deeply versed in the emotional and legal landscape of it, sat with me one evening and said something I've never forgotten. Michelle, the mistake most women make is that they go into this grieving, she said. They're so busy being heartbroken that they can't see clearly. But you have something those women didn't. You found out early. You have time, and time in a divorce is everything. She was right. I also had Will, a forensic accountant that Monet connected me with, who began a meticulous reconstruction of the business's actual financial performance over the 5 years of its most significant growth. He documented the revenue. He documented the growth trajectory. He documented the gap between what the amended partnership agreement said the business was worth and what the actual financial performance indicated it was worth. It was a significant gap. And it had a paper trail. Dante filed his paperwork on a Friday night in October. I remember the exact texture of that moment, the light in the living room, the sound of Diana watching something in her room upstairs, the smell of the dinner I had made that was still sitting on the counter, untouched. He came into the house looking like a man who had rehearsed this. He had the posture of someone braced for impact, shoulders back, jaw set. He sat down across from me and he said, "Michelle, I need to talk to you." I looked at him calmly. He spoke for several minutes. He talked about growing apart, about wanting different things, about how the marriage had run its course. He talked the way people talk when they've practiced in front of a mirror. He said he hoped we could handle it amicably. He used that word 3 times. Amicably. He did not know that I had a folder in my car with complete documentation of every marital asset. He did not know that my attorney Alex had already been made aware that the filing was likely imminent. He did not know about Will, the forensic accountant, or the gap between the amended partnership agreements and the actual financial performance of his business. He did not know that I knew about Lance Oliver's strategy to move things before I became aware. He did not know that I had already become aware. When he finished speaking, there was a long silence. Then I looked at him and I said, very quietly, "Okay, Dante, I think that's the right decision." He blinked. He had expected tears. He had expected anger or begging or a fight. He did not know what to do with calm. "I already have an attorney," I said. "You'll be hearing from her." He looked at me for a long moment with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was the expression of a man who was beginning to understand that he had miscalculated. The discovery process in a divorce is, as Alex had explained to me, the part where the truth gets forced out into the light. Both parties are required to fully disclose their financial situations. Both parties can depose witnesses. Both parties can subpoena records. When Alex and Will began presenting their findings, the forensic accounting, the reconstruction of the business's actual value, the timeline of the amended partnership agreements that just happened to have been executed in the months following Dante's first contact with Lance Oliver, the response from the other side was silence. Not the comfortable silence of people with nothing to hide. The calculating silence of people suddenly recalibrating. Quentin was deposed. He was calm and professional in the way that people who have prepared extensively for a lie can be. But Will had done his homework, and the questions were specific, documented, and relentless. There were moments in that deposition that I heard about secondhand, moments where the questioning circled around a particular transaction, a particular date, a particular decision, and Quentin's composure would fracture just slightly, just enough, just at the corners of his answers. Alex called me afterward. "They're going to negotiate," she said. She was right. What neither Dante nor his attorney had anticipated was Felix. Felix was a junior accountant who had worked at Dante's company for 3 years before leaving for another firm. He was quiet, methodical, and deeply uncomfortable with what he had been asked to do in the months before he quit. When Will began his forensic reconstruction and certain numbers didn't add up, he pulled on the thread, and the thread led to Felix. Felix had been asked by Quentin to prepare certain documents in a specific way. He had done it because he was young and he needed the job, and he told himself it was probably fine. But it hadn't been fine, and he hadn't been able to make himself feel fine about it, which was part of why he had left. When Alex's team reached out to Felix, he was surprised but not unwilling. He was not a person who could look away from something indefinitely. He provided documentation, verified financial records from the period in question, and was prepared to testify if needed. He turned out not to be needed for testimony. The moment Dante's legal team became aware of Felix's existence and cooperation, the negotiations accelerated dramatically. My friend Mike, someone who had known both me and Dante socially for years, and who had been quietly watching the situation with horror, "Michelle," he said, "I've known Dante for a long time, and I want you to know," I told him. A long time ago, before any of this, I told him that the worst mistake a man can make is to underestimate the woman he built something with. I don't know if he listened. He hadn't listened. But he was listening now. I need to stop for a moment because I know some of you have been holding your breath. I was holding mine for months. Please subscribe right now. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Every single subscribe is one more person who will know that you don't have to be destroyed when someone tries to walk away from what you built together. Subscribe now and stay with me for the part that finally made me cry, not from grief but from something completely different. Throughout all of this, every meeting with Alex, every session with Monet, every conversation with Alicia and Moira and Diana, my friend, I had been protecting my daughter Diana from the full weight of what was happening. She knew her parents were having problems. Children always know. She was 12, which is old enough to sense everything, and young enough that you still want to shield them from the specifics. There was one evening about 2 months into the legal process when she came downstairs late, past bedtime, and found me sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of documents and a cold cup of coffee. She sat down across from me. "Mama," she said, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at my daughter, this person I had brought into the world, this small and extraordinary version of everything I had ever hoped to be, and I felt the weight of every decision I had made over the previous months pressing down on me at once. "Yes," I told her, "we are absolutely going to be okay." "How do you know?" I thought about it. I thought about Alicia's warning at the diner, about Moira and what her mother had gone through, about Monet and her rust-colored blazer and her patience, about Alex and her phrase, "defense, done correctly, wins," about Will and his spreadsheets, about Felix and his conscience, about every version of the woman I had had to become over the previous months. "Because I paid attention," I told Diana, "and because the people who love us paid attention too." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on top of mine. "I love you, Mama," she said. I did not cry in front of her. I waited until she went back upstairs. The settlement conference happened on a cold morning in January. I wore the charcoal gray blazer that Alicia had made me buy 3 months earlier when I told her I had nothing to wear to legal meetings. "You need armor," she had said. "Pretty armor, but armor." The conference room was quiet and deliberately neutral. Beige walls, a long table, water glasses and legal pads, and the particular tension of people who have said everything through their lawyers and now have to sit within a few feet of each other. Dante looked tired. He had aged in the months since that October evening. The confidence that had always been his most dominant feature had receded into something more careful, more guarded. Lance Oliver, finally seen in person, was a composed, silver-haired man who moved with the controlled precision of someone accustomed to managing expectations downward. Alex sat beside me, calm as still water. The negotiations took most of the day. By the end, the settlement included my fair share of the marital equity, including the correctly assessed value of the business, which Will's forensic accounting had reconstructed to reflect its actual worth rather than the artificially deflated figure in the amended partnership agreements. It included the Summerlin house, which would be sold and divided, with me receiving a portion that reflected our equal contribution to its acquisition. It included provisions for Diana, generous ones, that Dante agreed to without resistance, because whatever had fractured between us, he was still her father. Alex had told me early on that I should not expect justice. She had told me to expect the best possible outcome, which was not the same thing. But sitting there, watching Lance Oliver sign documents that reflected a very different reality than the one he had been engaged to construct, I felt something close to what justice might feel like. Not satisfaction, exactly, something quieter, something more lasting. Completion. I want to tell you about the morning after the settlement was signed. I woke up in the house that was now technically in the process of being sold, in the room that had been mine and Dante's, in a bed I had slept in alone for months. The Las Vegas light was coming through the curtains the way it does in January, thin and silver and different from the bold summer light that had been there when we moved in. I lay there for a few minutes and I took inventory. I was 35 years old. I was a registered nurse with a career I had never abandoned. I had a daughter who the night before had made me laugh genuinely, for the first time in what felt like a very long time, by doing an impression of her homeroom teacher. I had friends, Alicia, Diana, Moira, who had shown up for me in ways I was still absorbing. I had an attorney who had fought for me with intelligence and conviction. I had a financial advisor who had helped me see clearly when everything was designed to obscure. And I had myself. The self who had sat on the bathroom floor for 11 minutes and then stood up and washed her face and called Alicia. The self who had walked into that settlement conference in armor and walked out with something real. A few weeks after the settlement, Alicia and I went back to the diner where she had first warned me about Dante all those years ago. We ordered the same things we always ordered: eggs for her, avocado toast for me, coffee for both. And we sat in the booth by the window and watched Las Vegas wake up around us. "Do you remember what you said to me?" I asked her. "About men like Dante not building things with women but on top of them?" Alicia smiled. It was the smile of someone who wishes they had been wrong. "I remember," she said. "I want you to know," I told her, "that I think you saved my life. Not dramatically, but really. You planted something in me all those years ago, and when I needed it most, it grew." Alicia looked at me across the table and her eyes went bright for a moment before she looked down at her coffee. "You saved your own life, Michelle," she said. "I just reminded you that you were the kind of person who could." I have thought about that conversation many times since. I think about it when I'm getting ready for work in the morning, in the apartment I moved into after the house sold. Smaller than the Summerlin house, nothing like it, but entirely mine. I think about it when Diana comes over on weekends and we cook together and she tells me about her friends and her music, and the small dramas of being 12 in a world that is large and bewildering and full of possibility. I think about it when I feel the particular mix of grief and relief and hard-won clarity that has become the emotional texture of this new chapter. I did not tell this story to make Dante a villain. People are complicated. Marriages fall apart for complicated reasons. I am not without fault in the story of us. I gave my energy to the marriage unevenly. I disappeared into work in ways that created distance. I made assumptions about security that were based on faith rather than verification. These are things I have had to sit with honestly. But there is a difference between a marriage failing and a marriage being dismantled in the dark. There is a difference between two people growing apart and one person engineering a departure designed to leave the other with as little as possible. That is what I needed to protect myself from, and I did. What I want you to take from this story is not revenge. Revenge is satisfying in movies and exhausting in real life. What I want you to take from this is something simpler and more useful. Know what you own. Know what you have contributed. Know the financial picture of your marriage, your household, your shared life, with the same clarity that you know your own name. Know the name of the bank. Know where the accounts are. Know what the business is actually worth, not just what you're told it's worth. Pay attention to the people who love you. Alicia told me the truth before I was ready to hear it. Diana from the law firm told me to learn what I owned. Moira shared her mother's story so mine wouldn't have to end the same way. These women did not protect me from pain. They gave me the tools to move through it without being destroyed. Get up off the bathroom floor. Not immediately. You're allowed your 11 minutes. You're allowed to fall completely apart in the only room in the house where no one can hear you. But then you wash your face, you call the person who tells you the truth, and you start building. Because here is the thing about a story like mine, the thing that I don't think gets said enough in all the family drama content and real-life betrayal stories and cold justice narratives. The real victory was not in the settlement room. The real victory was the morning after. The morning I woke up in my own apartment, in a life that was smaller and harder and more honest than the one I'd had, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt like myself. After years of being the woman behind Dante's success, the woman who kept the accounts and drove to meet the contractors and wrote checks at 2 a.m, after years of being the person whose sacrifice was invisible and whose presence was taken for granted, I woke up and I was just Michelle. 35 years old, a nurse, a mother, a woman who had been underestimated by exactly the wrong person at exactly the right moment. A woman who had paid attention. A woman who had gotten up off the floor. A woman who had, quietly and methodically and without a single shouting match or dramatic confrontation, made sure that the system her husband had tried to turn against her ended up working for her instead. That morning, Diana called me, not my daughter, my friend Diana from the law firm who had once told me to know what I owned. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked around my apartment. The morning light was different here than it had been in Summerlin, sharper, less filtered, the kind of light that doesn't let you hide from anything. On the counter was a coffee maker I had bought myself, a plant that Alicia had brought as a housewarming gift, and a photograph of my daughter laughing at something off camera, tacked to the wall above the window. "I'm feeling like I'm going to be okay," I said. And this time, I meant it in a completely different way than I had meant it to Diana, my daughter, sitting at the kitchen table with the cold coffee and the stack of documents. That time, I had said it to protect her. This time, I said it because I finally believed it myself. John, a colleague of mine at the hospital who had been quietly checking in on me throughout all of this, came by the apartment one evening a few months after the settlement. He brought takeout. We sat on the floor because I still hadn't bought a proper dining table. I was taking my time with everything in this new space. He looked around at the sparse, light-filled rooms and said, "You know what this place feels like?" "What?" "Like a first page," he said. "Like you just flipped to the beginning of something." He was right. This apartment, this new version of my life, is a first page, not an ending, because there are mornings when the grief still comes without warning, evenings when Diana is at her father's and the quiet sits heavily, but a first page. And I am a woman who has learned, slowly, expensively, irreversibly, that she knows how to write. My name is Michelle. I am 35 years old. I live in Las Vegas. I moved my assets in secret when I realized my husband was trying to leave me. And in doing so, I didn't just protect what I had built, I found out who I was when everything was stripped away. It turns out I was someone worth protecting all along. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you, truly. Please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Every comment, every share, every subscription is a reminder that stories like mine deserve to be told and heard. If you know someone going through something similar, share this video with them, not because it has all the answers, but because sometimes the most important thing is knowing that someone else got up off the bathroom floor and figured out how to start again. Subscribe now, and I'll see you in the next one.